Welcome to the National Institute of Montessori Education. I'm Eugenia from the Teacher Development Center. Today, we have the honor to interview Mr. Dane Peters from USA. Please enjoy the show. For the first question, we would like to know, as you were having a lot of experience with the administrative management and also emotional intelligence management, we would like to know if you could only choose three things. What do you think are the core factors of the leadership?
Well, it's three words, and it's an exercise that I used
Yes.
in the group that I was talking in my professional development group. And I asked them, what are three words, if you had to describe leadership at its best, what would be three words? And we came up with a huge list of words, and it was very diverse. But then I presented what my three were, and there was overlap, meaning some chosen. And the three words are respect, trust, and empathy for a good leader. So that's, all good leaders would have these characteristics. And they're essential, they're necessary for running an organization, be it a school, be it a for-profit company. But when you're leading people, there has to be trust, there has to be respect, and there has to be empathy.
Okay. I was there actually. The word that I choose is modeling. How did you see that? Does modeling somehow seems to me that it fits in all three other words that you choose? You know, you have to model how to respect people. You have to model how to be an empathy, to show your empathy. What do you think about modeling?
Absolutely, and often leaders don't understand that they're on stage all the time. So it's a work-a-day day, and you're doing all the things you have to do, and reading and telephoning and using the computer. But also you get out within the school, and people are always looking at you because you are the head of school or you are the chief financial officer. And they're watching you, and they're seeing how you interact with other people, other employees. And are you showing respect? So if I say to you in the morning, hey, what'd you do last night? Really? That's all? That's kind of stupid. That's not showing respect. As opposed to, what did you do last night, Eugenia? Oh, really? Did you enjoy it? Yeah, I know. I like that place too. And you're showing respect. And it's about being on the same level. And people, especially employees and teachers, want to be treated that way. Just as any leader wants to be treated that way with her or his boss, if you will, with respect. And then also, it's about having empathy. And you're modeling it all the time. So if you come in and you're talking to a colleague and you say, my cat died last night. She was 11 years old. And the person goes, the boss or the leader comes up and goes, you're crying over a cat? Come on.
Let's get to work.
Let's get to work. You're modeling that all the time. And people that see that and pick that up think, what an idiot. My God, that's terrible. So you are modeling, you are on stage all the time. And all of that modeling, people seeing how you respect and how you show empathy, it's what builds trust, that third word. And people start trusting you because they feel like you are thoughtful and you're treating other human beings the way you want to be treated.
Yeah, I think the trust is very important because sometimes under some circumstances, those leaders who cannot fully explain why we have to do this or what we are going to do. So they're depending on the trust that people who would have followed them would put their trust in them and do the work that they asked.
Yes.
So I could remind me of myself that there are some people who have that in their spirit or in their in their body. They don't have to learn, they don't have to practice. They're just the born leader. So what do you think about? Is it a born skill or it's a trainable skill?
It's both. It's both.
Okay.
Because there are some, and I've done a number of interviews for magazines, Montessori Life magazine, and one in particular, Mitch Adler, who is a psychologist, and he talks about how when he was growing up, he wasn't a particularly good student, didn't have great grades, but he said there was something about me that, not me, but himself, that people just liked. There was something that attracted people to him. And so it was a natural talent that he had. At the same time, we always need reminding, especially our emotional intelligence, and we can talk about that too. But it's something that takes practice, practice, practice. Even those people who are gifted and understand how to interact with other people, you slip up. And sometimes you have other things on your mind and you're not focusing on what you need to be and what you need to do to interact with people. So while it may be a natural trait, at times it goes away. And that's where you have to train yourself to keep coming back so that you are being empathetic, that you have humility, and that you're being thoughtful with other people.
So like being the leader constantly at all time, it takes practice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even though you may be a natural born, emotionally intelligent person.
Okay, what if I'm not?
Then you quit your job and go someplace else.
Maybe I need another kind of job to do. Okay, so speaking of this, what do you think makes a good principal or a good leader to, other than the three things that we've mentioned? Is there any other like requirements for a leadership role?
I think one of the big things is, especially when you're in a Montessori environment where she says you have to respect the child and you set it up so that the child can work independently and not need the teacher. And one of the quotes from Dr. Montessori was, I know the child is learning, the children are learning when they don't know him in the room, when she was teaching. And so often our education system is set up where I am the teacher. If I'm not here, you're not going to learn. It's impossible. You need me. And I like to think of that as a sage on the stage. I'm the know-all, and if you don't have me, there's no way you're going to learn. Whereas Dr. Montessori said, she said it's the guide on the side. In other words, you go do your thing. And I, as the principal, say, I want you to take care of your children. I want you to do your thing in your classroom without me. Because the best legacy that I can leave as a leader, as the head of a school, is that I can leave. And no one will even know that I'm not there. That is one of the best principles that you have. Although so often we're immersed in our own ego and that they need me.
Yeah.
Come to work, and if they don't have me, well, if they don't need me anymore, then I don't want to have anything to do with it. And that is so, so important to not get that way.
It's actually similar with the parents and children, right?
Oh,
sometimes they're thinking that the children are the one who need them, but actually the parents need their children more.
Yes, absolutely. And in today's day and age, there's a book that I reviewed for Montessori Life, and it's called iGen. For the generation that's born between 1995 and 2012. And what the book talks about is that children have become so dependent upon their parents because their parents, which we call in the Western world, we call them helicopter parents. They're always hovering, making sure that the child is okay, never let the child out, and
that's also happening in U.S.? I was always thinking that was like a Chinese parent.
No, we've invented right. Oh, and the beautiful book called Tiger Mom is about the Chinese culture and how it is you are going to be educated this way because you're going to go to a Western college and it's got to be an Ivy League school and so you must, and I'm going to get you tutored 3 hours a day. And
I'm going to be with you every single second.
Right. So they've gone from, what has happened is that they've gone from being helicopter parents to lawnmower parents. They just mow over what they want for their child. And unfortunately what they're doing is they're disabling their child because it makes them more dependent upon their child. So I, as a principal, I don't want to be dependent upon. I don't want people to need me on a daily basis. Now there will be times, whether it's running a faculty meeting or whether it's making sure that the accreditation of the school is coordinated properly. I'm going to use my expertise and I will help out. But the more I can pass that on to another administrator or another teacher, the stronger the school is going to be.
Then it will be our school, not the principal's school.
Absolutely.
Okay. So my next question will be, how does emotional intelligence show in a daily work?
Sure. One of the things that people don't understand is in emotional intelligence, and that is there are several factors. In emotional intelligence, I as an individual have to be doing an assessment on how I am doing in my communication, just as I'm doing with you now.
Oh.
And I have to monitor myself and say, Dane, you're talking a little bit too much. Let Eugenia talk and let her ask a question. So I'm monitoring, doing a self-reflection on how I'm doing, but I'm also aware of what do I have to change. So I'm going to be so emotionally sensitive that I don't take up all the time. At the same time, the other side of it is I am doing an inventory of how you are doing. And if you're talking too much, what can I do to manage your emotional intelligence so that it can be a 50-50 conversation? You talk a little bit, I talk a little bit. We go back and forth. Just as I'm looking at you, eye-to-eye contact. That is an emotionally intelligent individual who is making eye contact. And that's what you do on a regular day, especially in the workplace. You're always doing that with people because people then say, hey, he's really listening to me. He gets it. I like talking to Dane because he's not always talking all the time. He lets me talk. He lets me give my opinion on what's going on. So that emotional intelligence is so critical. And back to your earlier question, well, is that something we're born with? Or is it something we have to train? It's both. You have to constantly, just like I spoke yesterday at the professional development piece, there were people that I had in a class that I was here in 2017, and I was saying some of the same things. Some might have said, oh, he said that before. Well, fine, that they understand that, but now are you practicing it? And I talked yesterday, if you remember, about having an outer body experience. And as you step outside yourself and you watch yourself, Dane, you're talking too much. Just ease up. And I mentor heads of school. And so often I have to say to myself, Dane, shut up. Let the person talk. Be a good listener. Be a good listener. Because that's what the person needs. So it's about monitoring that all the time. And sometimes the conversation will be 75%, 25%, because that's what the person needs now. And that's where the empathy comes in. That's where the compassion comes in being sensitive to what the other person needs. Really important.
So I'm also thinking about this, we were always talking about like emotional intelligence. All the examples are between people, from one person to another person, and what comes and goes in between. But actually, I think it's also something that we could train ourselves. Like when you said practice, it's not actually you have to practice every time with another person. You could practice with yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when we go along, one of the best examples is the fact that we push away failure and say failure is bad. But one of the best things about a Montessori environment is it's an environment for children and adults too to say failure is okay. It's safe to fail in this classroom because that's the best way of learning is trying, not be afraid to try. Try it, doesn't work. Okay, what do I have to do next? No, I got to figure it out because that's not working. Whether it's coordinating a teacher activity or whether it's being a part of a committee that isn't working right. You're always asking yourself if you're doing that kind of an assessment. Let me just interject at this point that one of the most hidden aspects of emotional intelligence is humor.
Humor.
People think that, we can't be funny about this. But in fact, sometimes that's the best time to interject humor when things are getting, I told you, we're not going to do it that way. And it gets intense.
Yeah, awkward.
Very awkward and like, I'm not going to say anything, because obviously. But what you do is when you're feeling that tension, and if you have emotional intelligence, good emotional intelligence, you will be able to monitor that. So at times, you can say, hey, that microphone, is that talking or is that you talking? Just like that.
Yeah.
And you break it up and then all of a sudden, there's some relief like, okay, this person isn't so bad after all. And then the trust starts building because having that sense of humor is so, so important.
I actually have quite strong feeling about that. When we trust people, when we trust the leader, it's not always because he is one or she is the one to pull the trigger, to call the shot, but it's also that we emotionally depending on this person to feel safety, to feel secured. We would more likely to, be beside him and to go along with him.
Right.
That's a very important thing. Humor, okay, I'll remember that.
And another example that I used yesterday is Dr. Brene Brown. She has a wonderful TED Talk on shame and vulnerability. Often, if we're too sensitive, we won't speak up. We'll say, I'm not going to say that because it might make me look stupid. I don't want to be stupid with this group, look stupid with this group.
I don't want them to do not like me.
Right. And if you take that too far, then the good thoughts that you have and the good ideas that you have won't come out. And so it's about managing shame and vulnerability. And sometimes we have to extend ourselves. We have to go beyond to get out those good ideas and to make other people feel, okay, he's not afraid to embarrass himself, let's say. And I'm not saying you go out and embarrass yourself all the time, but if you've got an idea, you want to be able to put it on the table. And as an example, when I was head of a school, the Montessori school I was at, we were on a Board of Trustees retreat. Board of Trustees being these 20 people who were my boss, if you will. And I remember we had a facilitator who was there with us, and the facilitator sent us off to do some brainstorming.
Okay.
And this one trustee had proposed something about the idea that we would stop a program that we had at the school.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody kind of looked, that's the best program we have.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what draws kids to the school. But she said, well, but it's expensive, and there are things that we're doing are not in tune with Montessori.
Mm.
So people sat back and said, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But she wasn't afraid to put herself out there. And she did. Well, 2 years later, we did exactly what she suggested. And the school was so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And people would say, wow, I'm so glad we aren't doing what we used to do, that we were doing for 30 years. And how great for her to not be afraid to bring that up. And so that vulnerability and shame thing, it's necessary.
Okay, and I think it also goes back to the trust. You know, people would be more uncomfortable to, share their thoughts while they feel trusted,
Yes.
and they're in a team with familiar people, with people that they think are friends. So they're sure that they're not being harmed.
Yes.
You know, for shame, it's sometimes it's okay. You know, if you're a friend of me and you were saying, oh, you know, I do this. This is totally stupid. If you're a friend, I will think, okay, you're saying the same. You're not saying something about me.
Right.
That will feel much better.
Exactly, and to be more graphic, Patrick Lencioni, who is one of my favorite authors, he's a consultant for management and leadership in for-profit organizations, and he has 14 books out. And one of his books is called Getting Naked. And that's his way of saying, sometimes we have to get naked, not literally.
I know.
It's figuratively. We have to get naked sometimes to get the ideas out on the table so we can consider them. And in good governance, in other words, what trustees do, what nonprofit organizations do, is they want to make sure that there is generative conversation. That's a more sophisticated way of saying getting naked. In other words, in generative conversations, you can put anything out there. No, people may not agree with you, but they're not going to say, oh, that's stupid, Eugenia. Where are you coming from? Do you know what we're all about? They don't do that. They just say, okay, fine. And it passes if it has any merit. But if it has merit, people say, tell me more about that. That's different. And that's how big corporations, a company like Apple Computer, for example, in the States, I remember when that first came out, there was Microsoft and there was Apple Computer. And Apple Computer was this kind of weird thing that was invented in a garage in California.
It should be more open and, receptive.
Exactly. Well, all of a sudden, now Apple Computer is the largest company in the world. It's $1 trillion company. And Microsoft is still around doing its thing, but it's not what Apple Computer is now. Although, China is giving Apple Computer a run right now in technology.
Yeah. Sometimes we would all think about that. I should speak more or I should speak less. But it's always a saying here in wisdom. We will say that we need to protect against, to protect the one who always says, no, this is not okay. You just have to bring this kind of person in the group and listen to their thoughts. We might not be really acting on those thoughts, but we need to hear the voice who says no, who says it's not okay, it's not good enough.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where the emotional intelligence comes in terms of
really
do it in a way that, have we thought about doing such and such? Rather than, this is so stupid. Why are we doing this? That's not emotionally intelligent. But when you present it the first way, you say, we ought to think about this. Does anybody have any thoughts about this? That's where the emotional intelligence comes in and is really important.
And it really takes a good tempered leader.
Yes.
the leader or
Good word.
the facilitator will have to, take that information, focus on the information, not on the, the emotion part of
Exactly.
the conversation.
Because what it does is it disables everybody. And one more thing that I just want to mention is that Angela Duckworth is the guru on grit and resilience. In other words, when you come across failure in your life, you don't just give up and walk away and don't try again. It's those people who have grit and resilience. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. But one of the important things that we don't understand about grit and resilience, and she obviously talks about this, but it's coming out more and more from other authors, is that what resilience needs is rest. In other words, if you meet up with failure, you're going to be resilient. But before you come back at it, you walk away and you regroup. And you just go for a walk. Or you just divorce yourself from that topic for now. And you come back at it again, being revived and having rested. And all of a sudden your mind starts thinking the way it should be thinking. And you come back and you look at it in a different way. Let me try it this way. And all of a sudden, hey,
Yeah.
we got it.
Yeah. You should spend some time, thinking for yourself, and taking a cool down, and
Yes.
see it in another, like you said, seeing it in another angle, another point of view. Okay, so most of us, or there are some people, thinks that the emotion cannot be controlled. So do you think it is be able for us to fully or partly control our emotion? And to what level do you think we could control it or we cannot?
Well, it depends on what's making you emotional. If it has to do with possibly you're going to be losing your job,
Oh.
that really tenses you up and you're not thinking clearly and you stop being rational and you get emotional and just, this place just doesn't do it correctly. And you keep coming after me when it's Harold and Lisa who are the ones doing all of this stuff. And that's that emotional piece that just disables everything. And we have to back up and try to figure out a way of approaching it better. Did I answer that question?
I think kind of, because I'm going to use the example of if I'm like really angry and I can't listen to anything. If I'm really in that mode, I can listen to anything and I will fight back. I will fight back instantly.
Right.
When I get to that position, what should I do? Like everyone else will say that, okay, you take deep breaths, I think, but deep breath doesn't always work for me.
Right. Or meditation.
Meditation,
or
yeah. When you get nervous, when you get angry, it is so difficult to meditate. Or, my purpose is to calm down,
Yes.
and you just the way you are telling me is to calm down, and there's no method. There's no step, but in between. And do you think it's natural for people to feel that way, the emotion, things?
It is. I think it is. And it's just some of us are better than others in terms of how we manage our emotions. Here's an example. I remember I walked into a preschool classroom of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds at my school. And the kids are there, and the lead teacher and I were talking. And she was getting upset because something wasn't happening or we weren't doing something at the school that she felt we should be doing that. And I could feel the emotion welling up. When all of a sudden we hear, Jean, it was a 4-year-old calling the teacher. And she said, yes, Harold, yes. And he said, am I okay? He just came out of the toilet. He dropped his pants and he bent over and he was asking his teacher, did I wipe okay?
Yeah, that's.
We both, the teacher and I just broke down laughing. And she said, Dane, we'll talk about this later. But I've never forgotten. That happened 10 years ago. But I remember just doing that, and he was quite innocent. He pulled his pants up and he went about his business.
I probably will keep that in my mind. Maybe when next time I was getting angry, I was thinking about Dane's story about our am I okay? Okay, so you think that's natural for people to feel angry, feel frustrated, or feel sad. We just need to find or to know a way for ourselves how to control it and how to practice.
And also, too, to be compassionate. In other words, if you're getting angry with me and you're getting emotional, rather than my judging you and saying, oh, she's always that way. God, here we go again. As opposed to, I wonder if something's wrong. I wonder if something's going on at home that she's just uptight. And that's where I need to step back and help you step back. And then we'll come at it again after we've done some rest and walked away.
Oh, that's great. Okay. And the next question, could you share an example of emotion control in leadership?
Yes.
So the leader, how he or she controlled his emotion and did a great job. Do you have? I think you have a lot of perfect examples.
Here's one where I was in my second year as head of school. And I was in a finance committee meeting. This is a group of people who help me manage the finances. They basically take the responsibility, the ultimate responsibility of the school's finances. But it's a committee of trustees. And at one point, the chair of the committee, the treasurer, said, you spend way too much money on administrators.
Oh.
And the administrators aren't the ones teaching the kids, it's the teachers. Dane, you've got to redirect more of the funds that you spend on administrators to the teachers. And I said, well, first of all, let's understand that you put me in charge of running the school. And you give me a budget. And then I manage that budget with the business manager. But it's the finance committee that ultimately has to approve it. And he said, I don't care. I just think you need to do that now. And also another thing, you're spending too much money on professional development. Teachers don't need all that professional development. I looked at him, I looked at the board chair, I got up, and I walked out of the meeting. Because I knew I would have leaped over the table and just strangled him. And I said, that would not be good. I walked to my office. I was so angry, so frustrated. About 5 minutes later, the board chair comes in. He says, Dane, what'd you do? Where'd you go? I said, I couldn't stay there because I would have just made things worse because he's asking too many questions about the way I'm running the school.
If I keep explaining, it will get me more angry and he wouldn't agree with me the way that I'm running it.
Exactly.
Also, it's better to keep quiet.
Exactly. And another one on the classroom level, the head of the preschool and I were working with a family who had twins in school. One of the children was in one preschool classroom, another child was in the other preschool classroom. One was doing perfectly fine. The other child was being really, really belligerent and a bully and was bullying another student. And so the teacher had talked to the child and then brought it to the head of the preschool and they went back and forth. Well, the parents were getting angry with the teacher and the head of the preschool, and they came to me as the head of school saying, they're not taking care of my child. They're blaming my child all the time, and she's the victim. And the teacher reassured her that, no, that's not what's going on. I'm there, I'm in the classroom. Well, eventually what I had to do is I had to say to the family, well, it's going to be this way. If your daughter is not behaving that way, well, we're going to have to ask her to step out of the classroom or maybe not have her come to school for a day. But that's how firm we are on this. Well, if you're going to do that, then I'm going to take her out of school. Oh. This was December in the school year. And I didn't want to lose a child, especially for the child's sake. But we wouldn't have only lost one child because they were twins. We would have. And the preschool the head of the preschool and the teacher and I were all in agreement. This can't go on. So I sat down with the family and gave them a choice. You either do it this way, or yes, you will have to take your child out. They withdrew both children. And that was one of the most difficult things that I had to do. But I wanted to support the head of the preschool. I wanted to support the teacher. Not because I wanted to look good, because they were looking for the right thing, what was in the best interest of the kids in the classroom and the class.
Okay, so this is I think this is another example about leader, when the leader trusted the employee, the staff. Exactly. So you know that the teacher is telling the truth and the head of the preschool is telling the truth, and if they, as a professional, think it's not going to be okay, I should trust that decision and act on that.
Not without asking a lot of questions,
okay,
and getting verification, but absolutely.
Okay, and you are the one who actually talked to the parents?
Yes.
Okay.
With the head of preschool in my office with me. You never have those conversations with a parent alone.
Okay. Okay.
Because it turns out if you don't have another person in to witness it, it's always he said, she said. Whereas no, if they were questioning me or saying, no, you never said that, there was another person in the room.
Okay. But you never had the teacher to
No.
really get into this,
No.
right? Okay.
Just because that's not what she's paid for, so to speak. She's paid to take care of the children in the classroom, not to put up with these administrative hassles.
Yeah, okay. And so my last question, what would be the one sentence you'd most like to share with the Chinese teachers? Think about it, Dane. One sentence. Do you want me to make it for 2 sentences?
And I'm taking this from a book that I just discovered. It was recommended to me by a Montessori teacher. And we were talking about leadership. And it was a Montessori head of school that I was working with. And she handed me, have you ever read this book? And it's called Leading from the Front. And it was written by 2 women who are now consultants, but were 2 women. They were captains in the Marine Corps, the United States Marine Corps, which is really unusual. But they just wove in their experience as being women and captains of the Marine Corps with now the consulting that they're doing. And they talked about leading from the front, meaning that if that one sentence that you asked me is, be true to yourself.
Wow.
Be true to yourself. And that allows you to lead from the front as opposed to being someone else or second guessing yourself or trying to be someone else that you really aren't, because you think if, say, I'm more authoritarian, people will listen to me more. But that's not who I am. So be true to yourself.
Okay. Be true to yourself. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Dane.
You're welcome.
Okay. So thank you. And
Dan, we have prepared a little gift for you. Hope you like it. Okay, let's open it. A little postman. Yes. Just push your phone and they just. It's a notebook.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, write everything, Next time you come to us, we will have a notebook of Dane's writing.
Oh, thank you.
And here is our logo.
Oh, that is beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for taking our interview. Okay, let me do this for you.